Halo Infinite has been out for a while now, and people have been giving mixed reviews, to say the least. A lot of people have said that things were better when Bungie was in control, so I decided to come back to the beginning and see what the buzz was all really about. This game was the beginning of one of, if not the most iconic gaming franchises in the world. Taking all that info into account, I wanted to take a look at the game and see if it lives up to its reputation. I played a little bit of Halo 2 and 4, so I had some idea of how the game's played, or so I thought. This is a very distinct game, and you can feel Bungie slowly getting their stride throughout the game. A big standout is the health bar. Instead of having a single bar that always regenerates once you've gone long enough without getting damaged, you have a shield bar that once depleted makes you vulnerable. I'm a little torn about how I feel on this. On the one hand, the way Combat Evolved does health seems a little bit more realistic and logical. On the other hand, the way later games do things is a lot more convenient, and if you get hit a lot, you can regenerate your health and don't have to run around with low health looking for a health pack. For the most part, I prefer the later health system, but the one here is fine. I'm sure there's a mod of the later health system out there somewhere if this is a big issue for you. Development for Halo Combat Evolved took on a lot of shapes. It went from being a strategy game to a third-person shooter, until finally becoming the first-person shooter we now know it to be. About 90% of the game was developed in just 9 months of development, with devs working 16 to 20 hours a day for 6 days per week between January and October 2001. I'm glad that they have that level of dedication, or otherwise we might have gotten a much worse game. The sound design for this game is incredible. It seems like the entire world has heard the original Halo theme, and while that is iconic, this game has much more to offer. The music in this game elevates the experience as a whole, and every time the music plays, you can almost feel like a Spartan yourself. Every song feels appropriate and exactly right for the atmosphere. One thing about the campaign, it is very repetitive. You will go through an area that looks just like an area you've already been through very often, and after going through the library, you double back again through places that you've already been in. I'm willing to ignore this given that the game is 22 years old, but this is the worst aspect of the game, and there are people who have stopped playing just because of this aspect. There is some variability to how you personally deal with each room, but the thing that works most of the time is moving around and ducking behind cover. That means oftentimes, there seems to be only one successful way to approach each room. Finding that way is entertaining enough that you can really get engrossed in what this game has to offer, and it does have a lot to offer. The Marine NPCs who will sometimes fight by your side can liven things up even though they are liable to die pretty quickly. They have some fun dialogue lines, and when they die, they tend to drop a good amount of assault rifle ammo. The Covenant are a big part of that repetition given how there are only 3 or 4 different types of them. They are varied enough that fighting them was engaging enough that the area being the same half the time wasn't on my mind that often. The grunts randomly running away is a nice little bit of levity in between getting shot at by elites or the hunters. The hunters weren't that difficult as long as you stay out of their melee range, while the elites are a lot more mobile and a lot more accurate with their guns. They're probably the hardest to deal with individually because of this, and the silver ones who show up towards the end of the game are even more skilled and can hit you with a grenade from across the room.
And Janice does it! Stop it! Oh, please! What a catch! That's insane!
For the most part, the flood reveal was perfect. Taking things from a regular shooter to what almost feels like a zombie shooter made me understand why people love this game so much. At this point, you as a player are pretty accustomed to taking down the Covenant, and things haven't quite gotten easier, but you settle in a bit. Then suddenly, you have to deal with a whole new swath of enemies, and you're in a 3-sided conflict with killer aliens and walking abominations. It's very jarring, but in a good way. The Monitor was a very good addition. He felt like an apathetic version of CP3O, and having him give more and more information on the Flood and Halo as a whole was a good idea. His betrayal, quote-unquote, wasn't even a real betrayal. He just thought that Master Chief knew what Halo was intended for. His size makes him seem as though he isn't very menacing, but he has access to the Sentinels, who make your life miserable if their lasers hit you. The ending of the campaign was very fitting. At first I was disappointed with the final room, because it felt underwhelming as the final room, but escaping the ship makes up for it. Driving through and evading every enemy you've seen during the game, while making sure to get to the extraction point, just for the ship that's supposed to save you being shot down, and you having to get to another one. The fact that you're using a warthog is just icing on the cake. The ending has a somber tone, with Cortana revealing that she and Chief were the only survivors, and Chief sits down to relax for a bit and says that this is only the beginning. The difficulty progression in this game is very gradual except for the period between destroying Pulse Generator 2 and 3. In Pulse Generator 2, you get swarmed by the Flood and have to fight your way out. In Pulse Generator 3, there's just a few sentinels, and if you just run past them, you'll be completely fine. Outside of that, the game feels like it wants you to grow into being a super soldier, and you get better and better at doing just that. Whether jumping onto a Covenant transport to get to a Banshee, or drifting a Warthog into an Elite, this game has dozens of cool things for you to try. Weapons in this game are somewhat contentious. Some people seem to think that the Magnum is OP, and I disagree. Is it very powerful? Yes. Is it the most powerful pistol I've ever used in a game before? Also yes. Personally, I'm fine with this. It isn't game breaking, and it's probably the 4th most effective gun in the game. I feel like people don't like it because it's a pistol and it does so much damage for being a pistol. Outside of that, the game gives you the best gun in the game at the start of the game, that being the assault rifle. The assault rifle is a gun that most people can enjoy, and it's implemented in a very enjoyable way. It's effective in medium to short range, it does a lot of damage, yet you never feel like the experience is being watered down. The reason for that is the fact that you still have to move around and keep the enemies off of you. If they're right in your face, you can't do much unless you have the shotgun, and even if you do, lack of space to move makes things a lot harder. Speaking of the shotgun, I really enjoy the reload animation for it. When you reload the shotgun, you see Master Chief put in each individual shell, and I think that's a cool little moment that you only see if you're really paying attention. I do think that the Elite's pistol needs to be a little stronger if the Magnum is going to be so strong. I probably used it less than any other weapon outside of the Needler, because using it felt like shooting a water gun. The Plasma Pistol is probably the most effective Covenant weapon, yet it's dropped by enemies the most. One thing I don't like is the weapons changing from outside the library to inside the library. Up to this point, every time a weapon change occurs, it makes sense. Getting in a UNSC ship with a Covenant gun to end a level, then getting out with UNSC guns makes sense. Phasing through a pipe and the game changing your weapons here makes very little sense and can be a little jarring immersion-wise. Vehicles in this game play a surprisingly important role. A lot of times in first-person shooters, vehicles are only really used in the beginning of the mission. Halo takes this and flips it on its head. Almost every open space in the game is filled with vehicles and different ways to use them. The Warthog is the most iconic of the Halo vehicles, and that's for good reason. Driving one feels like being behind the wheel of a Jeep tank hybrid. They can't be destroyed, and they take corners very well. The Banshee is a vehicle that doesn't get the same type of recognition, and I think it's pretty decent. It's definitely slow, and you won't feel like you're in the Millennium Falcon, but they can be fun. I also used one to completely skip an area that had me stuck for a while in my first playthrough, so it's got a soft spot in my heart. I mostly stayed away from the Ghost unless it was the only option. It's not bad by any means, but riding around in one feels like riding on a glass cannon. The Warthog doesn't give much protection either, but the illusion of safety is nice. The Ghost is pretty fast though, and if you want to get through an area quickly, this might be your best bet. Master Chief is someone who I wanted to save for last. He's clearly meant to be a clean slate and isn't meant to say much, but the times that he does speak, it's purposeful and to the point. It feels like a mix of Captain America and Boba Fett, the one in Legends, not this one. I was somewhat neutral towards his back and forth with Cortana because of lines like this.
This cave is not a natural formation. Someone built it, so it must lead somewhere. Oh, I see. The coordinate data needs to be... Right. Sorry. This thing is falling apart.
It'll hold.
We're not gonna make it.
We'll make it.
Pull up! Pull up! You did that on purpose, didn't you?
But as the game went on, it started to grow on me. He should pretty much be like this in every game, and he should never, ever take his helmet off on screen. I get the hype. This game is really good, and if I was around when it came out, I know I would have loved it. The music, level design, and landscapes all come together to create a masterpiece. A dated masterpiece, but a masterpiece all the same. But maybe that dated feeling adds to it. This game inspired the rest of the franchise, and it was a great stepping stone. The story is a lot better than I expected and had me invested in the fates of the Marines and Master Chief. Captain Key's death was a truly sad moment after I spent 30-odd minutes fighting through the Covenant ship to reach him, just for him to already be gone. Finding out that every Marine that landed on Halo with me and fought beside me had all died was a moment handled really well. They make sure to communicate the fact that the events of the game were just a Pyrrhic victory and things will probably get worse. I really recommend this game for pretty much anyone who enjoys FPS games. The game is 22 years old and that's very clear. But the game is also so good that there's only one thing that makes that fact stand out, and that's the repetition. Outside of that, the game holds up so well that you could throw in some more variety in the set pieces and put it out today. That's what's so confusing about the 343 Halo releases. You have a working formula, stick to the stuff that works, throw out the stuff that doesn't. But maybe that's what makes the early Halo games so good. They have a unique feel that no one can recreate, no matter how hard they try.